1968. It is, by almost any measure, the worst year in modern American history. The war in Vietnam has turned into a bloody quagmire, and the Tet Offensive has convinced millions that their government has been lying to them about it. The cities are burning. In April, Martin Luther King Jr. is gunned down on a Memphis balcony, and grief erupts into riots in 100 towns. A sitting president, Lyndon Johnson, has been so broken by it all that he stuns the nation by announcing he will not even seek re-election. America feels as though it is tearing itself apart at the seams, and into that chaos steps a man who seems, to millions, like the last hope of holding it together. His name is Robert F. Kennedy, Bobby, the younger brother of the murdered President John F. Kennedy. Once his brother's attorney general, now a senator from New York, he enters the race for the presidency in March of 1968, carrying a message no one else can quite deliver. He is against the war. He is for the poor. And almost alone among white politicians, he holds the trust of Black America, of Latino farm workers, of the forgotten of Appalachia, and of the working-class whites who feel left behind, a coalition of the wounded that no one had ever managed to assemble before. On the night King is killed, it is Kennedy who climbs onto a flatbed truck in the heart of Black Indianapolis and, with raw and unscripted grief, tells the crowd the terrible news and begs them for peace. That night, while other cities burn, Indianapolis stays quiet. It is remembered as one of the great American speeches. Through the spring, his campaign becomes a movement. Crowds mob his motorcades. Hands reach for him until his own are raw and bleeding. And on the 4th of June, he wins the crucial primary in California, the victory that puts the nomination within his reach. Just after midnight, he addresses a jubilant crowd in the ballroom of the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles. He flashes the V for Victory sign. On to Chicago, he tells them, and let's win there. And then he steps down from the podium and takes a shortcut through the hotel kitchen. In that narrow pantry, a young man named Sirhan is waiting with a revolver. Shots ring out. Robert Kennedy falls to the greasy floor, a busboy cradling his head. He dies the next day. In the space of 2 months, America has lost both of the men who might have healed it. First King, then Kennedy. The Democratic Party tears itself to pieces at its convention in Chicago that August, as police club protesters in the streets. The nomination goes to Hubert Humphrey, and in November the country turns, narrowly, to Richard Nixon, and with him toward Watergate, toward a deepening national cynicism, and toward 5 more years of war. That is the history written in our world, the year the dream died twice. But our world is only one of many. Time runs in branches, and every branch turns on a single moment that might have gone another way. A gunman whose aim is true, or a gunman who misses by inches. A shortcut through a kitchen that ends in blood, or one that ends in nothing at all. Somewhere in that endless web of what-ifs lies a reality where the shots went wide, where Bobby Kennedy walked out of that hotel alive, and where the dream of 1968 did not die on a pantry floor. Let us cross over and follow that world all the way to its end. The moment of divergence comes in those few feet of tiled corridor, in the seconds after midnight. In our timeline, the bullets find him. In this one, they do not. A bodyguard's arm, a half step at the wrong instant, a shot that goes wide, and the gunman is wrestled to the ground with the candidate untouched. Shaken but alive, Robert Kennedy is hurried out of the Ambassador Hotel into the California night. And the movement that our history remembers as a beautiful thing, cut short, instead rolls on, gathering force, all the way to Chicago. The convention is still a battle. The party bosses distrust him, and Humphrey holds the machinery of the establishment. But Kennedy comes to Chicago as the man who won California, the last of the Kennedys, the one candidate the anti-war millions will accept. And this time, there is a living champion to rally behind, not a corpse to mourn. The bruising fight ends with Robert Kennedy as the Democratic nominee. And in November, against a divided country, Nixon on the right. George Wallace splitting away the segregationist South. Kennedy's strange and unprecedented coalition of Black and brown and young and working poor holds together just long, enough to carry him past Nixon in one of the closest elections the nation has ever seen. On a January morning in 1969, Robert Francis Kennedy places his hand on a Bible and becomes President of the United States. The dream that ended in Dallas 5 years before has, impossibly, come back to life. His first and heaviest burden is the war. Kennedy came to office promising to end it, and he moves to do what Nixon in our timeline would not, to wind down the American role in Vietnam years earlier, to seek a negotiated way out, rather than a wider war. The secret bombing of Cambodia that our history saw, the invasions, the tens of thousands of additional American dead, and the far greater Vietnamese ones, much of that agony is never inflicted. Because the man in the White House is racing to leave rather than to escalate. And yet even he cannot make the war end cleanly. The brutal arithmetic that trapped every president before him traps him too. There is no way to withdraw that does not look like defeat. No exit that saves the South from eventually falling. Kennedy may spare the world years of bloodshed. He cannot rewrite the ending. That is the tragedy he inherits, and only partly escapes. Nor is it only Vietnam that shifts. The whole of American foreign policy bends to a different hand. The dramatic opening to China that Nixon achieved in our timeline, the great surprise of his presidency, either comes later or comes wearing a wholly different face, pursued not by a cold anti-communist, proving his hardline credentials, but by a Kennedy who had stood beside his brother at the brink over Cuba and learned in his bones how close the world could come to the fire. The search for some thaw with Moscow and Beijing goes on because the logic of a nuclear age demands it, but the men who make it and the spirit in which it is made are not the same. History's grand handshake with the East is dealt from a different deck. At home, he turns to the cause that had become the soul of his campaign, the divide between the two Americas. He is, after King's death, the one white leader in whom Black America still places its faith, and he spends that trust freely, pouring himself into the fight against poverty that had moved him more than any other, the hungry children of the Mississippi Delta, the shacks of Appalachia, the migrant camps of California where he had stood with Cesar Chavez. For a few years, it seems possible that the widening racial wound of the late 60s might be bound rather than left to fester, that the rage boiling in the cities might find in the man in the Oval Office someone who was actually listening, and the absence of Richard Nixon changes the very texture of the age. There is no Watergate because there is no Nixon presidency to produce it. And so the great poisoning of American trust in its own government, the wound that shaped a generation's cynicism, never happens in the same way. The politics of law and order and the Southern strategy that realigned the country do not vanish, but the backlash that fed them was real and powerful. Written plainly in the millions of votes George Wallace drew, but they are delayed, blunted, forced to contend with a president who is actively trying to pull the country the other way. For a moment, the long conservative turn that defined our own decades is held at bay, and the road not taken seems to open ahead. And there is the matter of the family. For a second Kennedy to reach the White House is to make of the first one not a tragedy but a prelude, to turn the murdered president of 1963 into the founder of something rather than the end of it. The Kennedy name, which in our world became a byword for glittering promise, struck down again and again, becomes instead the name of a governing dynasty, remaking the Democratic Party in its own image for a generation. And the youngest brother, Edward, is spared the crushing weight our timeline laid upon him, the role of the last one left, the sole keeper of a murdered dream. His own life and the summer accident at Chappaquiddick that would come to define it in our world unfold, for better or for worse, along entirely different lines. But here honesty demands that we resist the beautiful story, because the presidency is not a movement, and the forces arrayed against him were enormous. The white backlash was not a phantom. It was a tide, and it would have battered even Bobby Kennedy. The war would have bled his popularity, as it bled everyone's. The economic storm gathering offshore, the oil shocks, the grinding inflation of the 1970s, was coming no matter who sat in the Oval Office, and it would have soured the country against him as it soured it against everyone. A hostile Congress, a divided party, the sheer intractability of the problems he had promised to solve. Any of these could have ground his presidency down into disappointment, could have made him a one-term figure overwhelmed by a moment too big for any single man. The dream imagines President Kennedy healing the nation. The reality might have been a good and decent man discovering, as his brother had, just how little even a president can bend the iron of his times. And there is a deeper and stranger truth beneath all of it. Part of the reason Robert Kennedy shines so brightly in our memory is precisely that he was taken before he could be tested, a martyr frozen forever in the moment of pure promise. His failures never written, his compromises never made. To let him live and govern is to let him become mortal. To trade the shimmering myth of what he might have done for the messy, tarnished record of what he actually could. The nation that has mourned him for more than half a century mourns, in part, a perfect thing that never had to survive contact with reality. The parallel gives him back his life. It cannot promise to give him back the dream intact. Follow that road to its end, and you arrive at the ache at the center of the whole story. The shots in that pantry did not miss. Within 2 months of losing King, America lost the other man who might have spoken to all of it at once, and the country's path bent away from him, toward Nixon, toward Watergate, toward the long, cold cynicism that followed. Whether Robert Kennedy would truly have healed the wound or merely raised a hope too large to keep is the question his death never let the country answer. And all of it, the road taken and the road lost, turned on a few feet of kitchen floor and a few seconds after midnight, and whether one young man's aim was true. That is how thin the line can be between the history we know and the history that might have been. This has been Historically Parallel.